Well, folks, thanks for tuning in again today, and stories just keep on rolling out. Thanks for checking here. We're giving you the top stories and the news that matters and giving you stuff behind the scenes and hopefully saving you time so you don't have to scroll through all kinds of various newspaper and TV channels, jumping right in and looking what's happening today. The story is about ice, and I'm not talking about the frozen temperatures across North America, but the ICE immigration officials continue really to lead, not just in the U.S., but we're going to bring you an interesting element here on how it's affecting Canadian business, what's going on in ICE. So hang tough here. Mainly, the question that is only now starting to arise with these very tragic deaths, of course, two that have occurred, is the fact that it seems only to be and mainly to be happening in Minnesota, in Minneapolis. Other states where ICE is moving just as vigorously, the problems do not seem to be anywhere near as much. And largely that's because the position of the state of Minneapolis and the officials there is that they do not turn over information to the immigration officials about illegal immigrants who have committed and been convicted of serious crime. In other states, there is information sharing that by law is required in the U.S. But in Minneapolis, they have made a decision not to share the information. So then you have the ICE agents actually going to the homes. They get the information. They go to the homes where there are illegal immigrants, but in some cases it appears that those being arrested they're there illegally. They have the legal right to be deported, but they haven't actually done crimes. So this is where it's breaking down clearly in Minneapolis, and real problems emerging there. Kristi Noem, who's the head of Homeland Security there, secretary, that is now, it looks like they're bringing in other people and moving other people out. So there's some changes being made there, but it should not be underlined. First of all, there's no excuse if anything wrong has been done in terms of how these very unfortunate deaths occurred, but there really should be, and I guess there's been some discussion between President Trump and Governor Walz in terms of the information sharing. So hopefully that moves along, and Minneapolis will move to the same position as other states, whether they're Democrat states or Republican states across the country that are following the law and not resisting. They're using this term sanctuary cities. Well, sanctuary cities is largely, in terms of U.S. law, a fabrication. Interestingly enough, the term goes way, way back to ancient biblical history, where it's first referred to sanctuary cities when the country is being allocated relative to Israel. There's some very clear legal proceedings that are required. If a person unintentionally kills someone, there were about 6 originally cities in all of Israel that were identified as sanctuary cities. So the person who the killing definitely happened, but it was unintentional, can actually flee to those cities and have a court case there, actually be tried there to determine if it was murder or if it was unintentional. That was the basis for sanctuary cities. It was written in law, and that goes, what's happening today in so-called sanctuary cities in the United States goes way, way beyond that. It's almost always democratically controlled cities. They need the immigrant vote, and this is something that people need to keep in mind. Why does it tend to be that Democrats or leftist parties are much more tolerant of even encouraging illegal immigration, undocumented voting? They need those votes in the demographics that are very clear over the last 10 to 15 years and appear to be continuing. Now, people might chuckle at this, but it's overall fact. Those people who identify as having a small c conservative worldview tend to have a slightly higher birth rate in terms of population than people who identify as small l liberal or Democrat. They tend to have smaller families. They're or maybe no families, their birth rate is actually declining. Overall, of course, there's a decline in the birth rate, but keep this in mind. Very broadly speaking, small c conservative states and areas are seeing a slight increase among their own voters. And so the Democrats, or the Liberals in Canada, are seeing that if they are going to continue winning elections in the long term, they're talking a generational plan here, they have to allow illegal immigration, because the people who are allowed in illegally will always be pursued, and actually they will be reminded that it's the Democrats or the Liberals that let them in. Usually the trend has been, when you look at these immigrant populations, if they're let in under Liberal or Democrat governments, they are reminded of that, and that generation will tend to vote Liberal or Democrat, but then they begin to shift back to small c conservatives. So Liberals and Democrats have a real problem. That's why they don't have a worry about illegal immigration. In fact, they encourage it, and really it becomes incendiary and becomes a source of violence then when the leftist protest groups get out there, when these tragic events happen and cause a stir. Then that's what you get to see 24/7 on the TV screens, and that's where it begins to get really political. So hopefully things will calm down. Looks like Governor Walz may be, in fact, agreeing to have a change in the information sharing so that it's only those illegal immigrants, undocumented immigrants, who have been convicted of serious crime. Many of them are in the jails right now in the state, but the information is not being shared with the ICE officials who normally would go to those jails and begin the deportation process. Well, what are the markets doing? Gold and silver still holding high. A bit of stability in markets generally, because this is what they call the earnings season, where the company's earnings are being released, and generally in the U.S., there's been an uptick on the stocks of considerable amount of companies, tech companies and others, energy-related companies. So it's looking like it's going to be fairly positive, and along the fact, too, that the Fed in the U.S. is purported, and that's going to be out today, so I'll make the prediction that they're going to announce that the rate is going to be held steady. The rate will be held steady is my prediction, along with others. Let's see if that holds, and that's generally why markets are stabilizing somewhat. Well, in Canada, there has been a very interesting approach just emerging now to the problems of ICE in the U.S., the immigration authorities, and all of the turmoil that's coming out of Minneapolis. This is becoming very political. And so in British Columbia, which is a severely socialist province, and it's called the NDP party, they, of course, are taking a political stand, and they have no business doing that, but they're taking a political stand this way. What they've done is they've identified there's, in Canada, one of Canada's most successful business personalities, Jimmy Pattison, now well into his 90s, but his organization does very well, supplies hundreds and thousands of good jobs across the country. But he also operates in the U.S., and he's got a facility, or there's a property that his company purchased a number of years ago, and in their normal course of business, they resell property, they buy new property. There's a property in the state of Virginia that they have signed a deal with some time ago to be sold to the Immigration Department, known as ICE. And here the Attorney General in British Columbia in Canada is looking at is trying to discourage that sale. Now, this is political interference that is just bizarre and driven only for political purposes, with media whipping up the misguided approach about what's actually happening in Minneapolis. It's public opinion, of course, is a factor. And now you have politicians who are desperate to get votes weighing in on this from another country and possibly hurting Canadian businesses. It's not just the Jimmy Pattison network. There's a vehicle manufacturer in Brampton that has 20 armored vehicles, has a contract for, has built and constructed these vehicles to be sold to ICE, and there's pressures there to stop that sale. And we have Hootsuite, which is a very successful Canadian tech company. They sell tech to all kinds of organizations, some of their technology being sold to ICE, and there's pressure on them to stop. All of this, remember, all of this surrounding media not giving the full picture. They're giving some of the picture, but not the full picture, and focusing in on why is it just in Minneapolis, and we've talked about why that's only happening there. So really, governments are getting a little crazy on this in terms of keeping the hysteria going so that they can get votes for themselves if they are left-leaning governments. Well, as we follow that story, also whipping up some interest. I don't know that it's at the point of hysteria, but there's circulating on Instagram and on X, there is what is purported to be an imam, and he's telling about the fact that since Islam is increasing in numbers, which it is worldwide, and certainly in the US and in Canada and in Europe, they are on a 40-year plan, and in 40 years they will be a majority of the population. And this is what they say, or this is what this imam is saying, and that's going to mean then once Islam is the majority, then non-Muslims will have the choice to either convert or to pay a certain kind of a tax, or in fact be killed. And here's the problem. So that is circulating, and it's supposedly off of a publication, off of a online blog site run by this imam. And trying to authenticate it is problematic, but the problem is millions of people are seeing it, and so there's some difficulty in terms of identifying whether it's real. Of course, there's other similar ones that have gone up too, but it shows the problem, and it's posted on a site that is hosted by a Dr. Malouf. It's hard to identify who actually that person is, or there's a picture there, of course, which brings us back to a real problem that we have with internet and with publishing, and that's the fact that you can publish almost anything, and you can do it anonymously. You put a fake picture, a fake name up there, you can be anonymous and not held accountable. You can't be sued. It's more difficult to trace. This is a real difference just over the last, say, 15 or 20 years than we've had with media publications in the past. Before, for instance, if you wanted to send a letter to the editor to voice your views to any major or even minor newspaper, that was always letters to the editor, were always a good source of getting information out just for the average citizen. But you had to, I used to do that too, used to send a letter to the editor. You had to send your name, your address, where you lived, your phone number, and different times where I had sent in letters to the editor, the newspaper would actually phone. They would check and they would verify that it was you, and then they would publish it. And of course, that is no longer the case, and people can say things and get rumors going in wild ways and not be held accountable. So with all of the ways they're looking at trying to control various types of items that are different types of content that are on the internet, maybe it's time to be looking again at this element that used to be really a mainstay in all media, and that's identifying. If you want to be out there publicly saying and posting, you need to be able to be identified, and then these stories can be tracked down and you can be held to account if they're not truthful. Well, on the overall controversy that's going on in Minneapolis, but it's becoming international since media is showing all of the content that are up there. The elected representative for the area, Ilhan Omar, most of you would know her, people in the US certainly do, and in Canada. Frankly, I think she's a terrible representative and is constantly being caught bringing forward information, let's say, that is eyebrow-raising and not necessarily factual. In spite of that, she did something. She was attacked by somebody. She was doing a town hall meeting. This just happened, and she was approached and sprayed with something. You know what? People on all sides of the aisle politically need to stand up against this type of thing. I will hand it to Ilhan Omar. She was holding a town hall, a public town hall meeting. Politicians are increasingly afraid to do that because of attacks that can occur from people who really should be in jail for doing that. So I'm hoping that the person has been arrested. I'm hoping they get charged. And it leads back to even when you saw the horrific and tragic killing, the assassination of Charlie Kirk, you actually had people on the left celebrating it, people going online, cheering that on. Folks, we've got to give ourselves a reality check here. And right across the political borders, we need to have this common agreement amongst a community of citizens that violence against people, well, violence against anybody should never be accepted, and against politicians it should not be accepted, should be dealt with and should be discouraged. And we hope whatever was sprayed on Ilhan Omar, there are not going to be any ill effects of that. Well, in terms of public reacting to things, kind of some people are sort of amused with the series, very, very successful series called Yellowstone with Kevin Costner starring, and others, of course. And that came to a sort of abrupt end after its fifth year because there were ongoing disputes with Kevin Costner and with various people who are involved in the production, etc. And it's so much so that apparently the series drew to an end faster than was intended, and apparently the main character being killed off. What's been very interesting is the public reaction to the final outcome of the series. Huge numbers, we're talking thousands, if not millions of people reacting, saying he shouldn't have been killed off, that character shouldn't have been killed off, you got to change the ending, you have to do something. And people have been sort of saying, you know, are we losing our minds as public, as citizens, that we go berserk when a fictional story doesn't end the way we want it to? What's happening to us? If it gives you any solace, this is not a new reaction. Those of you who are familiar with the series called Sherlock Holmes, written by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, this series was written over 100 years ago. Well, go back as far as 1893. Sir Arthur Conan Doyle was also a writer of history and a follower of serious historical research. And the Sherlock Holmes series was becoming so popular that he actually wanted to move out of that and get to more of his historical research. So in his final edition, there was an account where Sherlock Holmes, as the fictitious detective, is in a battle with his arch enemy, Professor Moriarty, and he winds up falling over the top of some waterfalls and dies. And people were completely incensed. The buying public went berserk. They did not want Sherlock Holmes killed off. It got to the place where people were canceling their newspaper subscriptions because some of the stories were carried in the newspaper. People were getting angry. There was protests. And it was actually even beginning to affect Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, he's the author, his livelihood. And so after 10 years of people protesting that the fictitious character Sherlock Holmes had in fact died, he rewrote a story, or he wrote another story saying, guess what, folks? Sherlock, our beloved Sherlock, survived that fall over the waterfalls. Didn't die, as was reported. All is well. And Sherlock Holmes had to bring peace to an audience, not just in the UK, but worldwide, that was upset over that fictitious ending. Quite a situation with human nature. Well, on a good side, in terms of a medical breakthrough, it's being reported from China Medical University. Now, this is China Medical University in Taiwan, not in communist China. Some real breakthroughs relative to Parkinson research, where apparently they have found a therapy that is able to bridge what's called the blood barrier and get to the actual roots of Parkinson's. So it's very positive news there. I'm not saying we don't know if that means drugs being made immediately available, but quite a breakthrough being reported there. And talking about fans, Travis Kelce and his future continues to be up in the air. And of course, it's much broader than just the sports world and the football worlds because of his slight association with Taylor Swift. Actually, there's still speculation. Is the marriage on or is it off? But Travis Kelce's thinking about, is he going to retire or not? That's been big news, especially because he did not perform in the Pro Bowl this year while he thinks about it. You know, the guy's 36 years old. He's a multi-millionaire, and that I have no issue with that at all. He had 76 receptions in the last season and about 851 yards. That actually put him about the middle of the pack. Obviously, he's not the young man he used to be, but he's still phenomenal in terms of his age. So, you know, thinking about what he's going to be doing as his former prowess is not quite at the peak level it used to be. And Taylor Swift did not get any Grammys this year, nothing in the way of major touring. So a lot of speculation happening there. Is Tay and the TNT crowd, are they going to tie the knot after all? Let's just wait and see. Well, on the faith side of things, latest reports by Pew Research and others show that on the question of how many people identify as Christian, that there is, though the absolute numbers go up just because the population is increasing, as a percentage of society, those numbers have been dropping. In the U.S., for instance, in 2007, 78% of people asked identified as being Christian. Now, I'm not saying whether they were or weren't. I'm just telling you on the polling question, which doesn't change over the years. They keep that same question. And now it's at 63%, from 78% to 63%. Just since 2007, that's quite a drop, a fairly significant drop. You're seeing that drop similarly with those who identify as Christian around the world. Interestingly, as a percentage of the population, however, it's moving up in the countries of China, India, Indonesia. And those are countries which have been increasingly antagonistic towards the Christian religion, more and more persecution, cases of people being arrested and jailed just for professing to be, in fact, Christian. India, by the way, it's sort of been under the radar a little bit outside of India, but Prime Minister Modi, unfortunately, taking some pretty significant steps against Christianity. So the Christian religion, is it true? You can decide. Where life is easy, it appears less people are identifying as Christian. Where it's tough and you get persecuted, the numbers are actually going up. Food for thought, folks. Thanks for staying tuned in. We'll get to your comments tomorrow and catch you then. Have a great day. Stay warm.